Jurassic Park. Star Wars. Two movies that changed the cinematic landscape the day they were released to theaters. Movies that exhibit the best qualities of the film medium: an intriguing premise, memorable characters and performances, groundbreaking special effects, strong stories with interesting themes, and most importantly, great marketing and merchandising.
Darth Vader with his lightsaber. Princess Leia, champion of the rebel cause. With her defender, Luke Skywalker. You can swing him into action on his grappling hook. And load Chewbacca's laser crossbow. Star Wars large-size action figures. Up to 15 inches tall and ready for action. Large-size Darth Vader, Chewbacca, Luke Skywalker, Princess Leia, each sold separately from Kenner.
Jurassic Park, where the giant dinosaurs live again, with all the excitement of the movie.
Dino damage!
Look for the JP mark, only at Jurassic Park.
Anyone who grew up on these movies has as many memories of playing with these action figures and playsets as they do of the films themselves. The sequels were a mixed bag. Jedi and Empire are universally loved and are often considered superior to the original. Jurassic Park had two sequels that went from almost great to almost terrible. To this day, the fanbase still considers the original the best this series has to offer. Cut to 2015. There hasn't been a new Jurassic Park movie in 14 years, and everybody was still trying to wash the bad taste of the Star Wars prequels from their mouths. And we were all anticipating the first installments in the new trilogies. What we got were remakes. Well, soft reboots, which means remakes that exist in the canon of the older films. For the most part, everyone seemed pretty pleased with them, and both films set up promising sequels that both fan bases were generally excited for. Things were good. Trump wasn't even president yet, and no one had any reason to expect anything less than another safe, semi-remake of movies they already loved.
Jurassic World Fallen Kingdom, just to summarize, is not good. It may be my least favorite Jurassic Park movie yet.
So, Mike, would you recommend Jurassic World Fallen Kingdom?
And Jay, I assume you're a non-recommendation?
No, it's just terrible.
Okay. Let me start this review by saying, fuck this movie. Fuck this movie and fuck everyone in it.
This was the worst Star Wars movie I have ever seen.
This whole movie was why the fuck.
I just got out of freaking Star Wars Episode 8, The Last Jedi, and holy donkey dick did that movie suck.
And it's pretty rare for me to feel so strongly about a movie that I tell people not to watch it. But I kind of want to tell people not to watch this. So if you love dinosaurs, if you love the original Jurassic Park movie, or even if you are like into animals, if you're like an animal person, don't watch this movie.
This movie is trash, bruh. This is a whack, trash, garbage movie, and I can't believe what Disney did to me. JJ built some characters up. He built Poe, he built Rey, and he built Finn and Kylo. And guess what they did?
Rian Johnson is the Undertaker of Star Wars. He put it in a grave.
So, what did you think of Fallen Kingdom?
This movie was some dumb shit.
Really?
I think there may have been a total of 5 minutes accumulated throughout the film where I wasn't wondering what the fuck I was doing in the movie theater.
Okay, that's cool. I think it's practical effect.
Really should have done is trust women. No matter what, it doesn't matter what the situation.
And then he milks a giant
Luke doesn't give a
lactating
shit, chucks it off a cliff.
Whatever
Number
the
two,
fuck those
a
are.
TIE fighter
I call
destroys
them
Leia's
fat
ship,
fucks
leaving her
that
to
Luke
die
just,
in
like,
space. But
milks and drinks
gotcha!
and makes everyone feel really uncomfortable, and it's gross and stupid. And why? Why are they there?
Why?
You need genetically engineered.
Luke Skywalker.
So they genetically engineered.
Has he offered to withdraw? From the process?
Well, that got dark. Suffice to say, both movies were controversial and divisive. Personally, I was a big fan of J.A. Bayona and Rian Johnson long before they signed on to make these movies. The more I saw both these movies, the more I realized that they have a lot in common. Both are huge franchise movies directed by art house auteurs. Both have their preceding movies and their proceeding movies directed by the same people. And most importantly, both films take drastic measures that push both series into new directions. And I think because a lot of fans don't like these new directions, these movies aren't given as much credit for what they do right. And both films do a lot right. Both these movies have so much in common. Fallen Kingdom is just The Last Jedi with dinosaurs.
Part 1. We'll fix it in production.
Fallen Kingdom and Last Jedi have some great ideas to work with. In The Last Jedi, Luke is a hermit who has ran away from the Force due to an unknown tragedy. Rey feels completely lost in the conflict between the dark side and the Force and needs direction desperately, but Luke denies her. Kylo, who himself feels conflicted, feels a mutual confusion between him and Rey, and they slowly start to grow closer together. Meanwhile, the rebels are getting slowly picked off by the First Order, who vastly outnumber and outgun the rebellion. Finn and Rose go rogue to find a weapons dealer who may help them sabotage the main ship, but who presents challenging information to them about the nature of their war. If you were Kathleen Kennedy and the guy who made the modern sci-fi classic Looper, and the hugely underrated Brothers Bloom, why wouldn't you give this guy the keys to the castle? The problem is that Rian Johnson takes his sweet time to make his movies. Between Brick and Brothers Bloom, it took 3 years to make a heist film wrapped around a tragic family drama. Between Brother Bloom and Looper, he took 4 years to make a mind-bending time travel movie with a very dark moral center. These are movies that are incredibly tightly written and focused, mostly because Johnson has a very unusual writing process, as explained in this episode of the Q&A podcast about Looper.
Yeah, well, I mean, the way that I work, which I wouldn't suggest doing it this way, is I'm really slow, and I'll spend nearly a year in notebooks, but not writing dialogue. I'll just be working on sketches for scenes and bigger ideas and structure and kind of diagrams, and sometimes a line of dialogue will come to me that I'll write down that'll end up being like a keystone thing. But mostly it's just like, structure and then narrowing it down. So when I get around to actually writing dialogue, which is like the last 10% of the process, which I think are the pages that you saw, I have a pretty good. I've had those characters in my head for a while, and so it is kind of, it is kind of just, it is transcription to a certain degree. Yeah.
On your Tumblr account, I remember you posted a picture of the notebooks, and they had years on them. What years was it that you were writing this?
I guess it must have been 2009 that I started writing it, and I guess, and then it took about a year or so to get it written. Year and a half, probably.
Year and a half, okay. And so the notebook phase was about how long would you say?
Well, it's the whole time, because I write my first draft in those little notebooks. I hate sitting in front of a computer, and so in longhand, so there are like 3 small moleskin notebooks that have the whole script in them, basically, that I write it out, and and then my first editing pass basically is transcribing that into the computer.
Rian Johnson was announced to be the writer and director of Episode 8 in summer of 2014. The Last Jedi was released mid-December 2017, giving him about 3.5 years to make a huge Star Wars film, and if that wasn't daunting enough, The Last Jedi is also his longest movie. Up until The Last Jedi, all his movies were under 2 hours long, something that you can sort of feel as the movie climaxes at the 2-hour point with the whole will Rey join Kylo sequence. This is his sort of natural runtime as a writer, much like how every Shyamalan movie is around 107 minutes long. He is someone who takes structure very seriously, and when allowed to work at his own pace, he nails it, but he had a big franchise installment he had to find his voice in, a ton of money and pressure on his side, and about 2.5 years to deliver the final product. Rian Johnson was working against his own process while writing it. There are times when the dialogue is so on the nose and basic, it feels like it was meant to be replaced with better dialogue in the subsequent drafts.
I failed you, Ben. I'm sorry. I'm sure you are. The Resistance is dead. The war is over. And when I kill you, I will have killed the last Jedi.
Amazing. Every word of what you just said was wrong.
But given the time pressure, I don't think Johnson had a lot of time to do more than a few drafts. I wouldn't be surprised if he only turned in one. Maybe if Disney paired him up with another writer like Lawrence Kasdan, he would have had a more tonally consistent and better paced story. But before you go and call Rian Johnson a bad writer, watch his other movies as they play to his strengths way better. If anyone is to blame here, it's Disney and Kathleen Kennedy for sticking with the release date arbitrarily and not letting the writer and director do what he has to do. Fallen Kingdom is a much dumber script, but J.A. Bayona directs the living shit out of that movie and elevates it from B-movie schlock to B-plus movie schlock. Unlike Last Jedi, this movie was written by the same guys who wrote the previous movie in the series, so there's a better continuity of ideas and characterization, but the ideas are dumb and the characters are more archetypes than people. The story serves as more of a framework for a series of fantastically directed and edited action sequences, and despite becoming more of a gothic horror movie in the second half, this movie handles tone much better. I think it's because Bayona didn't write the script. All he had to do was focus on directing, and in turn he gave us some of the best moments in the series in terms of pure action. To the credit of the writing in both films, these movies give us unique perspectives on these series. From the way Rian Johnson democratizes the Force in a way that made sense, to the way Connolly and Trevorrow make the bad humans more monstrous and blue Rexy ever were. These movies give us a darker and more thoughtful look into the ideas that were always at the core of these franchises, which brings us to Part 2, Blowing Up the Past. These movies share a lot of resemblance to the sequels of the original films in the franchises. The Lost World has almost the exact same setup, with the mercenaries versus hippies conflict and the dinosaurs making it to the mainland. The darker, more savage tone and cinematography along with the moral ambiguity felt like a natural continuation of the theme of man failing to control nature. The dinosaurs have bred on their own, and the resort-like island has been replaced with the jungle. All the technology that humans use to help them survive on the island are destroyed by the dinosaurs at the midpoint. And the second half of the movie sees the humans and dinosaurs on equal footing as they venture deeper into carnivore territory to make an escape. Then we go to San Diego, and the film becomes King Kong. This represented a point of no return for the entire franchise. It's not that the idea of bringing dinosaurs onto the mainland was inherently bad, it's that the darker tone the film had managed so well up until this point is thrown out the window with the sillier moments of the finale. From that point on, the series was no longer about ideas and themes, it was about dinosaurs and blockbuster filmmaking. Fallen Kingdom takes the basic story of the Lost World, but, with all respect to Spielberg, Bayona does it better. There's a lot more clarity and consistency in his vision. It doesn't start with a dark and savage tone, it works its way to it, the first half being more of an action-adventure film, and then it slowly becomes a gothic horror movie. It doesn't rush the dinosaurs on the mainland story in the last act, it gets them there in the second half and fully takes advantage of the premise. The movie portrays the dinosaurs as victims of man's hubris. They were cloned and stuck on a volcanic island and will soon face re-extinction. This is the first film in the Jurassic Park franchise to have one human directly kill another one, and it also shows the mercenaries willing to leave the protagonist to die on the island with the rest of the dinosaurs. The dinosaurs that survive the island are put in tiny cages and get sold off to be used in war, until another clone intervenes and allows them to live with the rest of us. The movie fully commits to change. Each act takes a bolder step than the last until the franchise is permanently put on a new path. In The Last Jedi, Rian Johnson focuses on deconstructing the tropes of the series, exploring them in unique and fresh ways. The scene of Leia floating in space encapsulates the way Johnson treats the Force. It's a moment of hopelessness. Leia should be dead, but she reaches out, like Rey does in her first lesson with Luke, using the Force to take her back to safety. This moment is considered controversial, as it shows someone with no Jedi training using the Force, and that goes against the canon of the movies. However, the Force was originally described by Obi-Wan as something that flows through all living things. It's something everyone possesses and can probably learn to use on their own. If anything goes against canon, it's midichlorians, since it changes the Force from something mystical to something scientific and draws lines as to who can and can't be a Jedi. Johnson democratizes the Force and the hope that it gives. Rose is a maintenance worker. We first see her mourning the loss of her sister, but by the end of the movie she is piloting a crappy ship against the First Order. The writing of her character is flawed, but what she represents is the redefinition of what a hero can be in a Star Wars movie. The purpose of Rey's parents being nobodies is that Rey is still powerful despite it, which is a far more meaningful reveal than if she was a Skywalker or a Kenobi or whatever. The Resistance is slowly reduced in numbers to only about a dozen people by the end of the film, and in the most hopeless situation we have ever seen them in, Luke returns to make a last stand in hopes of inspiring anyone who opposes the First Order and the Sith. Rian Johnson replaced space battles with inner struggle. Each character turns to help from people who let them down with their cynicism. Despite this, each character finds a way to go on without the help they seek and become heroes in their own way. Yet, for all the interesting ways Rian Johnson explores the themes of the franchise, he lets down the audience in the end. The Battle of Crate, as amazingly well shot as it is, was a bad way to go out. The most interesting moment in the film is when Snoke is killed and Kylo presents Rey and the audience with the bold proposition: no more Jedi, Sith, Resistance, or First Order. Every theme explored in the film culminates in this moment, and they set it up for Rey to take his hand and to become something completely new. But the movie pulls the rug out from under itself. I believe that Johnson originally intended the movie to end with a cliffhanger, but considering that there were not very many big battle sequences, Disney forced the fourth act on the movie. This scene has a lot going for it, but it doesn't feel organic to the story. The dialogue is bad, often feeling like they're out of the prequels.
Woo! I like this!
I'll try spinning. That's a good trick.
At one point, Poe just outright spells out the subtext of Luke's final stand to the audience.
He's doing this for a reason. He's stalling so we can escape.
Escape? He's one man against an army. We have to help him. We have to fight.
No. We are the spark that'll light the fire that'll burn the First Order down. Skywalker's doing this so we can survive.
Finn and Rose's kiss is so tone deaf that it's funny, and her explanation as to why she stopped Finn didn't make much sense.
That's how we're gonna win. Not fighting what we hate. Saving what we love.
If Johnson was used to taking up to a year and a half to write a script, and considering how tightly plotted his other movies are, I could see him having to write the most basic version of this scene in a rush to please the studio. While the movie does end in a way that makes predicting episode 9 mostly impossible, it will still be a Resistance versus First Order story, and after all the clever deconstruction Johnson does, it feels disappointing that it ends in a similar way that it began.
Part 3.
I don't want to grow up fun.
Hollywood franchise.
These movies are made by people who love these franchises. One thing that I think is very clear, even to those who dislike the stories of these films, is that these directors really gave it their all, and their passion comes through in these films. What kind of people come up with crazy stuff, like turning a Jurassic Park movie into a gothic horror film, or to go to a casino planet in a Star Wars movie? Dorks, nerds, fans. People who have thought about these movies so much they have unique and new ways to explore them. These ideas are expressed most in the child characters of these movies. Though it's a small part of the film, the slave kids on Canto Bight carry a lot of thematic weight. The kid lives in a stall with one of those weird horse dog things with the ears, and when he first sees Finn and Rose, he recoils in fear. It isn't until he learns that they are with the Resistance that he decides to help them. The film leaves them in the background until the very end of the movie. Luke sacrificed himself to inspire the next generation. In the final scene of the movie, these kids, who speak an alien language, retell the story of Luke facing off against Kylo on Crate. His plan worked. The only thing the kid says that we can understand is his name, Luke Skywalker, showing that he is a legend once again. They get sent back to work, and the kid in the stall uses his force power to grab a broom. He then does the traditional character looks off to the stars shot that ends every Star Wars movie, holding his broom like a lightsaber. A key thing to remember about this character is that he's a slave, just like Anakin Skywalker before he became a Jedi. The Force was always democratized. Luke was a moisture farmer, Finn was a janitor, Rose was a maintenance worker, Rey was a scavenger, and all of them, either through the Force or just by standing for what they believe in, bring down the First Order/Empire. When George Lucas made the Force about things like the midichlorian counts or separating kids from their parents to train them, and political intrigue, he sort of sapped a lot of the magic out of it, and Rian Johnson wanted to make the Force something mystical and accessible again. Macy is the key to Bayona's vision for Fallen Kingdom. Much like the slave kid, she represents the relationship the fans have with the series. She's a clone, just like the dinosaurs in the movies are. She is introduced with a toy dinosaur tail, foreshadowing her reveal as a clone. When the Indoraptor is introduced, Henry Wu says that it needs a mother. Then the film dollies into a close-up of Macy as she eavesdrops before running downstairs and encountering the Indoraptor. The Indoraptor then does something interesting. She is described and later revealed to be a sophisticated killing machine made for war, but Macy backs into its cage, and instead of reaching out and killing her, she brushes her hair. Throughout the scene in the museum, the Indoraptor seems to focus his attention on her again, as he abandons Claire and Owen to chase after her. Then when she catches up to her in her bedroom, she doesn't attack her, she just sort of hovers over her. The Indoraptor has several opportunities to kill Macy if she wanted to, yet each time she holds back. Why does a violent carnivore always stop itself short from killing such an easy target? Because they are both clones. Both of them are science experiments who spend their days in either a prison or in a mansion. It's implied that Macy is homeschooled. It's safe to assume that the only people in her life are her grandfather, her nanny, and Eli. And in this movie, she learns how evil man can be. Her grandfather is killed by Eli, not some dinosaurs. At the end of the movie, we have a clone who has seen how bad humans can be as she watches other clones, the dinosaurs, die due to how careless humans were. Her character arc culminates with her deciding to change the course of human history by letting the dinosaurs out into the real world. At the beginning of the movie, Claire asks if we want kids to grow up in a world without dinosaurs. And the kid in this movie, one that is a big dinosaur nerd and has Jurassic Park toys, decides that yes, we do want more dinosaurs and dinosaur movies. But Bayona makes it clear that if we want more stories, we gotta tell new ones instead of using the same tropes and themes for each installment. A funny thing about the response to these films is that despite their similarities in themes and quality, A lot of people might not like Fallen Kingdom, but a lot more people hate The Last Jedi. There's so much hate for it, Russian trolls are using it as propaganda, which begs the question.
Part 4. What's with all these dorks and their angry video essays?
I think the reason there is so much more hate for The Last Jedi than Fallen Kingdom is because of how these films marketed themselves. Each trailer for Jurassic World revealed more and more information that should have been kept a surprise, going so far as to show shots in the final scenes of the movie in the final trailer. By the time fans went to go see it, they had a pretty good idea of the big events of the movie. I stayed away from the third trailer, so I was pleasantly surprised by the twists and reveals, but for anyone who went into the film having seen it, it must have been pretty boring as you saw everything coming. But boredom isn't anger, and I think most people kind of forgot about the movie the next day. Disney seemed very confident in The Last Jedi, and the trailers were vague and only revealed the most basic of information. Before this, there were years and years of fan theories about who Rey's parents were and the secret identity of Snoke. The imagination of the fan base went wild, creating all these elaborate answers that they were hoping would get validated in the new movie. The little information revealed in the marketing created more mystery and, more importantly, higher expectations. Rian Johnson gave the fandom the answers they were looking for. The Last Jedi is a very flawed film, but it is a Star Wars film in every way. It's just not the Star Wars movie anyone expected. And to people like me, that's awesome and bold and exciting. But for many others, they can't get in line with this new Star Wars, and that's okay. But to those people, I asked them to try and watch the movie again with their expectations of what Star Wars should be turned off, and see Star Wars through the eyes of Rian Johnson, as many people like myself found his vision fascinating and as close to something new as the series is likely to ever get.
Part 5. How we got here.
Before the MCU, Hollywood worked far differently than it does today. While there were always franchise movies, they would be made on a film-by-film basis. The Dark Knight wasn't greenlit until a year after Batman Begins was released, and the filmmakers were given a lot of time to craft a movie that is widely considered the best superhero movie ever made. There were only 4 or 5 superhero movies a year, and each one of them were made by a different studio with different filmmakers, giving each series a unique flavor. Independent filmmakers had to prove themselves with several small movies that increased in scope if they were to even be considered for a big Hollywood movie. The Dark Knight itself was Christopher Nolan's 6th film. His first 3 movies were small in scope, but he used them to hone his storytelling craft. He made Batman Begins and showed a very different and much darker superhero than came before it. He made The Prestige, where he learned how to craft a multi-layered story. All of the lessons he learned culminated in The Dark Knight. Hollywood learned a big lesson after the success of that movie. Give these franchises to auteurs. It wasn't long after that we saw filmmakers like Mark Webb, Gareth Edwards, and the director of Jurassic World, Colin Trevorrow, get huge franchise movies despite only directing one other movie before then. At first, it seemed like Hollywood was trying to bring bold new visions to old franchises, but the problem is these directors were inexperienced, and the studios knew that, making big creative decisions for them as they didn't have the clout to fight back. The studios had a lot of control over Godzilla, Amazing Spider-Man, and Jurassic World. While you do see the amazing visual style of Gareth Edwards in Godzilla, the good interplay between characters Mark Webb brought to Amazing Spider-Man, and the competency of Colin Trevorrow in Jurassic World, they didn't have the same personalities 500 Days of Summer, Monsters, or No Safety Guaranteed did. These franchise movies that are made by auteur filmmakers cheat the studio, the fans, and the talent making the movies. Entire franchises are announced and greenlit at once. Talented directors who lack experience get picked out to pump out a product by a certain release date, which is locked in long before a script is ever completed. And the directors have to find their way in all of this, all in an effort to keep up with Marvel. While we still get some great movies out of all this, for the most part, we get safe and watered down products made by committee, and not by writers or directors with stories they are dying to tell. The studios push these movies out to feed the insatiable hunger of the fans. We are past the point where movies get made on artistic merit. Instead, directors have to bring artistic merit to corporate mandated releases. In the post-auteur Hollywood landscape, the creativity and subversiveness of these movies are as close to auteur filmmaking as we get. So when you see movies like this that play in their franchises so well but take them in bold new directions, let's appreciate the few artistic risks we get these days, because let's face it, this is the future now. And it's thanks to all of us fucking nerds.
Before we get into the actual meat of the episode, when we run you through all the movie news and other things going on in the world of the council, I'm thrilled to be at Denny's. Denny's has been a huge staple of the Ellis family since I was an Air Force brat and we were on the road. We were at a new Air Force base, but you always had a Denny's there in the distance.
Thanks for watching. That was our very first video essay. We got more video essays coming along with more podcasts and short films. Like and subscribe our YouTube channel, and be sure to check out our other work and tell us what you think of it.